When Alexander Sterling, a man who built walls around his heart, meets Elena Hart in an elevator, everything changes in an instant. Before we continue with this incredible story, hit that subscribe button below and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support means everything to our storytelling community, and we love connecting with viewers from around the world. Alexander Sterling had never believed in love at first sight. At 32, he'd built an empire, transformed his grandfather's modest company into the Sterling Group, a multinational corporation worth billions. He'd dated beautiful women, attended charity galas with models on his arm, and left a trail of broken hearts across 3 continents. But he'd never felt anything real, never felt that spark everyone talked about. His assistant, James Park, often joked that Alexander had ice water running through his veins. His board members whispered that he was married to his work. His grandfather worried that Alexander would die alone, surrounded by his achievements, but empty inside. "You're like a robot," his grandfather had said just last week, his weathered hands gripping Alexander's shoulders. "Brilliant, successful, but missing the most important part of being human. When will you let someone in?" "When I meet someone worth letting in," Alexander had replied coolly. His grandfather had shaken his head sadly. "You won't recognize her when you do. Your heart has been locked up so long, you've forgotten where you put the key." Alexander had dismissed the conversation as the ramblings of a sentimental old man. He had everything he needed, everything he wanted. Love was a distraction, a weakness that made men stupid and companies vulnerable. That was before the elevator. That was before Elena Hart. The Sterling Group headquarters occupied the most prestigious building in the city's financial district, 60 floors of glass and steel, a monument to Alexander's success. He arrived every morning at precisely 7:30, reviewed reports while his driver navigated traffic, and entered through the private executive entrance to avoid the lobby crowds. But on this particular Tuesday morning, his routine shattered. His grandfather had called at 6 a.m., insisting Alexander pick him up from the airport personally. "I want to see my grandson, not his driver," the old man had declared. So Alexander had gone, which meant arriving at the office 2 hours later than usual, which meant entering through the main lobby, which meant he had to use the elevator. Alexander was reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet when he sensed movement to his left. A young woman was running, actually running, through the marble lobby, her portfolio case bouncing against her hip, her dark hair flying behind her like a banner. She was going to miss the elevator. The doors were already closing when she called out, "Wait, please!" Alexander's hand shot out automatically, stopping the doors. He didn't know why he did it. He never held elevators. Time was money, and other people's poor planning wasn't his problem. But something made him act. She stumbled into the elevator, slightly breathless, and looked up at him with the most extraordinary eyes he'd ever seen. Warm brown, flecked with gold, wide with gratitude and surprise. "Thank you so much," she gasped, pressing her hand to her chest. "I'm so sorry. I know I'm late, but the bus broke down, and then I couldn't find the right building and—" She stopped abruptly, seeming to realize she was babbling. "Sorry, thank you." Alexander couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare. She was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't just that. He'd seen beautiful women before, dated them, forgotten them. This was different. This was like being struck by lightning, like falling, like drowning and being saved simultaneously. Her cheeks were flushed from running. A strand of hair had escaped her neat bun and curved against her cheek. She wore an inexpensive but well-fitted navy suit, and she clutched her portfolio like it contained the world's secrets. There was a small coffee stain on her sleeve that she seemed unaware of. She was imperfect and hurried and completely, utterly captivating. "What floor?" Alexander heard himself ask, his voice rougher than usual. 42, please. Design department interviews." He pressed the button, noticing that his hand was slightly unsteady. What was wrong with him? The elevator began its ascent, and Alexander became hyper-aware of everything. The subtle scent of her perfume, something light and floral. The way she nervously shifted her weight from foot to foot. The small smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she glanced at the ascending floor numbers. Then the elevator jerked violently and stopped. The lights flickered. The display screen froze at floor 15. "Oh no," the woman whispered. "No, no, no, not today. Please, not today." Alexander was already pressing the emergency call button. "This is Alexander Sterling. The main elevator is stuck at floor 15. "Mr. Sterling!" The security guard's voice crackled through the speaker, suddenly panicked. "We'll get maintenance right away, sir. We're so sorry. Just fix it quickly." He ended the call and turned to his unexpected companion, who had slumped against the wall, looking devastated. "This is a disaster," she murmured. "My interview is in 15 minutes. I've prepared for weeks. I can't miss this." "What's your name?" Alexander asked. She looked up, surprised that he was speaking to her. Elena Hart." "Elena." He liked the way it sounded. Soft, musical. "I'm Alexander." "Nice to meet you, Alexander." She managed a weak smile. "Though I wish it were under better circumstances." "Tell me about your interview," he said, partly because he wanted to calm her down, but mostly because he wanted to keep her talking, wanted to learn everything about her. "It's for a junior designer position at Sterling Group." Her eyes lit up despite her anxiety. "It's my dream job. I've been following the company's work for years. Their approach to sustainable design, the way they blend aesthetics with functionality, it's revolutionary. I know I'm just a recent graduate, but I have ideas, real innovations that could—" She stopped herself. "Sorry, I get carried away when I talk about design." "Don't apologize." Alexander moved closer, drawn to her passion. "What kind of innovations?" And so, trapped in an elevator, Elena Hart began to talk. She spoke about her vision for eco-friendly packaging, about her thesis on user-centered design, about the way colors and shapes could influence consumer behavior. Her hands moved as she spoke, painting pictures in the air. Her whole face transformed, becoming even more beautiful with enthusiasm. Alexander listened, genuinely fascinated. He'd sat through thousands of presentations, heard hundreds of pitches, but he'd never heard anyone speak with such genuine love for their craft. "You know what's funny?" Elena said after she'd been talking for 10 minutes. "I'm supposed to be nervous preparing my interview answers, but talking to you, I feel calm. Thank you for that." "You shouldn't be nervous," Alexander told her. "Anyone who speaks about their work the way you do deserves to be hired on the spot." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes, like music. "I wish my interviewers thought like you do." The elevator lurched back to life, and Alexander felt an irrational surge of disappointment. He didn't want this to end, didn't want to let her walk away. As the doors opened at floor 42, Elena grabbed her portfolio and hurried toward the exit. Then she paused, turning back. "Thank you again, Alexander, for holding the door, for listening, for making this disaster feel a little less terrible." She smiled that radiant smile. "Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll see you around." Then she was gone, disappearing down the hallway, and Alexander was left standing in the elevator feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. James Park was waiting when Alexander finally reached his office on the 60th floor. "You're late," James observed. "That never happens." The elevator got stuck. Alexander moved to his desk, but he couldn't focus. Couldn't think about anything except brown eyes and passionate speeches about design. "Mr. Sterling, are you all right? You look different." "I'm fine." "You're smiling." Alexander's hand went to his face, surprised to find it was true. "Get me the list of today's design department interviews." "Sir?" "Just do it." 20 minutes later, Alexander was reviewing the list when he saw it. Elena Hart, 10 a.m. interview. He checked his watch. 10:15. She'd missed her slot because of the elevator. He picked up his phone and called the design department. "This is Alexander Sterling. I'm coming down for the interviews. I'll be conducting them personally today." There was shocked silence on the other end. Alexander Sterling never involved himself in junior position interviews. "Yes, sir," came the eventual response. "Right away, sir." Have you ever had a moment that changed everything? A moment when the world shifted on its axis and nothing looked the same? Alexander Sterling was having that moment. and he was about to make sure Elena Hart had it too. The design department interview room fell silent when Alexander walked in. The 3 interviewers, including Victoria Chen, the department head, jumped to their feet. "Mr. Sterling!" Victoria's perfectly composed face showed rare surprise. "We weren't expecting—" "Continue with your interviews," Alexander said coolly, taking a seat at the back of the room. "I'm just observing." He'd timed it perfectly. Elena Hart was just entering, slightly disheveled, clutching her portfolio with white knuckles. When she saw him, her eyes widened in shock. "You're—" she started. "Late," Victoria interrupted coldly. "You're late, Miss Hart. We've already moved on to the next candidate." "I'm so sorry," Elena said quickly. "The elevator got stuck. I can explain—" "Excuses." Victoria's voice was dismissive. "The business world doesn't care about excuses, Miss Hart. If you can't even arrive on time—" "The elevator malfunction was building wide," Alexander spoke up, his voice cutting through Victoria's speech like a knife. "It delayed several people this morning. Miss Hart is here now. Let her interview." Victoria's mouth opened, then closed. She recovered quickly, gesturing to the chair across from the panel. "Very well. Please sit, Miss Hart." Elena sat, but her hands were shaking slightly as she opened her portfolio. Alexander wanted to reassure her, to tell her to breathe, to be the passionate woman he'd met in the elevator, but he remained silent, watching. Victoria barely glanced at Elena's work. "Your resume shows limited practical experience. What makes you think you're qualified for a position at Sterling Group?" It was a hostile question, designed to intimidate. Alexander's jaw tightened, but Elena lifted her chin. "You're right. I don't have years of experience, but I have fresh eyes, new perspectives. I've studied every product Sterling Group has launched in the past 5 years. I can tell you what worked, what didn't, and why." She pulled out several designs from her portfolio. "These are my reimaginings of your current product line. Improved functionality, reduced environmental impact, and enhanced user appeal." She laid the designs on the table, and even from his position at the back, Alexander could see they were exceptional, bold, innovative, exactly what Sterling Group needed. Victoria barely looked at them. "Interesting, but theory isn't practice, Miss Hart. We need team players with proven track records." "Then give me a chance to prove myself," Elena said firmly. "A trial period. 3 months. If I don't exceed your expectations, I'll leave quietly." Alexander found himself smiling again. She had fire. Courage. She wasn't backing down. "I don't think—" Victoria began. "She's hired," Alexander said, standing up. All eyes turned to him. "Miss Hart will start in the design department tomorrow. Victoria, I trust you'll handle the onboarding." Victoria's face went pale, then red. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, we have procedures. And I'm the CEO. Miss Hart, welcome to Sterling Group." He allowed himself to look at Elena directly, saw the shock and joy and confusion warring on her face. "Don't be late tomorrow." He left before she could respond, before he did something stupid like stand there staring at her all day. Back in his office, Alexander tried to work, but his concentration was shot. He kept thinking about Elena's smile, her passion, the way she'd looked at him like he was just a man, not a CEO, not a billionaire, not the legendary Alexander Sterling. Just Alexander. "Sir?" James knocked and entered. "The design department just called. Victoria Chen is unhappy about your decision. Victoria can adjust or resign, her choice." "Sir, forgive me for saying this, but I've worked for you for 6 years. I've never seen you personally involve yourself in a junior hiring decision. Is there something about Miss Hart that—" "She's talented," Alexander said shortly. "That's all." James raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He knew his boss well enough to recognize a closed subject. But as Alexander returned to his reports, he knew James was right to question. This wasn't normal. None of this was normal. In the span of one morning, his entire world had tilted. He'd met someone. He'd felt something. And for the first time in his 32 years, Alexander Sterling understood what all the poets and songwriters had been talking about. He was falling in love. Elena's first day at Sterling Group was a mixture of triumph and trial. The design department, led by the still hostile Victoria Chen, made it clear that they viewed her as an outsider, someone who'd gotten her position through favoritism rather than merit. The CEO's pet, she heard someone whisper. Probably slept with him, another voice added. Elena tried to ignore it, focusing on her work. She was assigned to a small desk in the corner, given minimal resources, and excluded from team meetings. But she persevered, staying late to work on designs, offering ideas that were systematically dismissed. And through it all, Alexander watched. He didn't mean to be obvious about it. He told himself he was just checking on his investment, ensuring that his instinct about Elena had been correct. But he found excuses to walk past the design department, to review projects that didn't need his input, to be in the same spaces she occupied. He was being subtle, he thought. He wasn't. Everyone's talking about it, James said one morning, 2 weeks after Elena started. The CEO who never looked twice at any employee is suddenly very interested in the new designer. I'm interested in all our employees, Alexander said, not looking up from his computer. Sir, you visited the design department 5 times yesterday. You've never visited the design department 5 times in a year. Alexander's jaw tightened. Is Elena, Miss Hart, performing well? By all accounts, she's exceptional. Even Victoria admits her designs are innovative, though she'd never say it to Miss Hart's face. James paused. Sir, may I speak freely? When have you not? The employees are speculating about your relationship with Miss Hart. Some rumors are unflattering to both of you. Alexander's head snapped up. What kind of rumors? That she's your mistress, that you're having an affair, that you hired her for reasons that have nothing to do with her qualifications. James's expression was sympathetic. I know none of that is true, sir. But the perception... Find out who's spreading these rumors, Alexander said coldly. And fire them. Sir, that could be dozens of people. Office gossip spreads fast. Then make an example of someone. I won't have Elena's reputation destroyed because people have nothing better to do than gossip. As James left, Alexander stood and moved to his window, looking down at the city below. He'd been so careful his entire life. Careful with his heart, careful with his emotions, careful never to show weakness or vulnerability. But Elena had shattered that carefully constructed armor in 20 minutes. And now he was making mistakes, being obvious, potentially damaging her career before it even started. He should stay away from her. Let her build her reputation on her own merit, maintain professional distance. He knew that's what he should do. But that afternoon, when he saw Victoria Chen berating Elena in the hallway over a minor error, something in him snapped. Is there a problem? Alexander's voice cut through Victoria's tirade. Both women turned, startled. Victoria's face went pale. Mr. Sterling, I was just providing feedback to Miss Hart about... I could hear you from 50 feet away, Victoria. That's not feedback. That's harassment. He looked at Elena, saw her cheeks flushed with embarrassment and anger. Miss Hart, come with me. Victoria, my office. 1 hour. He turned and walked away, knowing they would follow. In an empty conference room, he stopped and turned to Elena. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle now. I'm fine. But her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm sorry. I made a mistake on the product specs, and everyone makes mistakes. Victoria's response was inappropriate. He wanted to comfort her, to promise he'd protect her from everything. But he couldn't. Not without making things worse. Elena, I want you to know that you were hired because you're talented, not because of anything else. I know that. She met his eyes directly. At least I'm trying to believe it, but it's hard when everyone assumes the worst. I'm making things difficult for you, Alexander said quietly. My attention, my interest, it's causing problems. Your interest? Elena's voice was soft, questioning. And there it was, the moment, the chance to tell her the truth, to admit that he hadn't been able to stop thinking about her since the elevator, that he'd fallen in love with her the moment she'd looked at him with those golden brown eyes. But before he could speak, his phone rang. His grandfather. "I need to take this," he said reluctantly. "But Elena, I want you to know, you belong here. You earned your place. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." He answered the phone, watching as Elena nodded and slipped out of the conference room. "Alexander," his grandfather's voice was weak, concerning. "I need you to come home. It's important." "What's wrong?" "Just come. Please." Alexander found his grandfather in the study of the family estate, looking frailer than he'd seen him in months. The old man's hands shook as he poured tea. "Sit down, boy. We need to talk." "What's going on? Are you sick?" "We're all sick eventually. That's not the point." His grandfather fixed him with a sharp look. "I'm dying, Alexander. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less." The world stopped. "No, we'll get better doctors, specialists, whatever it takes. It's stage 4 cancer. There's nothing to be done." His grandfather held up a hand when Alexander started to protest. "I've made my peace with it, but before I go, I need to know that you'll be all right, that you won't be alone." "I'm fine. I have the company, "You have nothing that matters," his grandfather interrupted. "No love, no family, no real connections. You're the richest, lonely man I know." He leaned forward. "I'm changing my will, Alexander. If you want to inherit the company, you need to be married within 6 months." "That's insane." "That's my decision. Find someone real, Alexander. Not a business arrangement. Not a trophy wife. Someone who sees you, not your money. Someone you love." Alexander thought immediately of Elena. Brown eyes, passionate speeches, that smile. "I can't force someone to marry me just to satisfy your requirements," he said. "Then don't force. Find someone who wants to marry you because they love you." His grandfather's expression softened. "I've seen the way you've been lately. Distracted, smiling at odd moments. Is there someone?" "There's maybe, but it's complicated." "Love always is, but it's worth it, Alexander. It's the only thing that really is." That night, Alexander lay awake in his penthouse apartment, staring at the ceiling. 6 months to get married. 6 months to convince Elena Hart that he wasn't just her boss, wasn't just attracted to her talent, but genuinely, deeply in love with her. 6 months to prove that the man who'd never believed in love at first sight had been completely wrong. Alexander's plan was simple: court Elena properly. Take her to dinner. Get to know her outside of work. Let her see him as a man, not just her boss. The execution was less simple. "Absolutely not," Elena said when he asked her to dinner 3 days later. They were in his office, ostensibly discussing a design project. "Mr. Sterling, I'm flattered, but I can't go to dinner with you." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because people are already talking. Because—" She hesitated. "Because I can't afford to lose this job, and dating you would be the fastest way to destroy my credibility." She was right. Alexander knew she was right, but desperation made him bold. What if it wasn't a date? What if it was a business dinner? We'd discuss your designs, future projects. "Mr. Sterling." "Alexander, please, just call me Alexander." Elena sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in a gesture he was coming to recognize as nervousness. "Alexander, I appreciate the offer, but the answer is no." He should have accepted that, should have respected her boundaries. Instead, he found himself saying, "I've never begged for anything in my life, but I'm asking you, Elena, one dinner. If you're uncomfortable, if it feels wrong, we'll leave immediately and never speak of it again." She studied him for a long moment. "Why? Why is this so important to you?" "Because I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted. "Because from the moment I saw you running through that lobby, you've been in my head, in my thoughts, in every decision I make. Because I've never felt this way about anyone, and I need to know if what I'm feeling is real." Elena's eyes widened. For a moment, she said nothing, and Alexander wondered if he'd just made a catastrophic mistake. Then, softly, "One dinner, but somewhere quiet, where no one from the office will see us." Relief flooded through him. "Tomorrow night, I'll pick you up at 7. "I'll meet you there," she corrected. "Give me the address." The restaurant Alexander chose was perfect. Intimate, discreet, with private booths and a chef he'd known for years. He arrived early, nervous in a way he couldn't remember being since high school. When Elena walked in, his breath caught. She wore a simple black dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she was absolutely breathtaking. "You look beautiful," he said as she slid into the booth across from him. "Thank you." She was nervous too, he could tell. Her fingers played with the edge of the menu. "This is a very nice restaurant. I wanted somewhere special. Alexander, before we go any further, I need to tell you something." Elena set down her menu and met his eyes. "I'm married." The world stopped again. Different from when his grandfather had announced his illness, but just as devastating. "Married," Alexander repeated flatly. "It's not what you think. It's not a real marriage. It's complicated. A year ago, my grandmother needed surgery, expensive surgery that I couldn't afford. A friend connected me with someone who needed a wife on paper to access his inheritance. We got married, I got the money, and we've lived completely separate lives. We're supposed to divorce soon." Alexander's mind was racing. Relief that it wasn't a real marriage. Confusion about the arrangement. A strange, possessive anger at the unnamed man who'd married her first, even if only on paper. "Do you love him?" The question came out harder than he intended. "I've never even really met him. We communicate by phone and text, but that's it. I don't even know what he looks like." Elena's expression was earnest. "But that's why we can't do this. Not until I'm officially divorced. It wouldn't be right." "When?" Alexander asked. "When is the divorce finalized?" "We're meeting next week to sign the papers. Then it'll be over." "And after that?" He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "After you're free, would you give us a chance? A real chance?" Elena looked down at their joined hands, and he saw her swallow hard. "I don't know if I can separate you from my boss. I don't know if this is real or if it's just proximity and power dynamics and—" "It's real," Alexander said fiercely. "Elena, I've been in business for 15 years. I've met thousands of women. I've never felt anything close to what I feel when I'm with you. This isn't about power or proximity. This is about you. The way you think, the way you laugh, the way you light up when you talk about design. This is about the fact that you're the first person who's made me believe in love." "You've never been in love before?" "Never. I thought I was incapable of it. Then I met you." Elena's eyes glistened. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me." "It's the truth." He squeezed her hand gently. 1 week. Sign your divorce papers, end that chapter of your life, and then let me take you on a real date. Let me show you that what we have is worth pursuing." She was quiet for a long moment, and Alexander held his breath. Finally, she smiled. That radiant smile that had haunted him for weeks. "Okay, 1 week, then we'll see." It was enough. It had to be enough. The week that followed was the longest of Alexander's life. He forced himself to maintain professional distance at work, to not show favoritism, to treat Elena like any other employee. But every moment was torture, knowing that soon, they could be together properly. He told his grandfather about Elena, about their agreement to date after her divorce. The old man's eyes lit up with hope and happiness. "I knew you had it in you," he said, gripping Alexander's hand. "I knew you could love someone." "Don't die on me," Alexander said roughly. "I need you here to meet her properly, to be at the wedding." "Then you'd better marry her fast," his grandfather joked. But Alexander could see the exhaustion in his face, the way the disease was stealing his strength. It made everything more urgent, more precious. On the day of Elena's divorce meeting, Alexander could barely concentrate on work. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for her message that it was done, that she was free. The message came at 2:47 p.m. "It's complicated. Need to talk. Can you meet me? Alexander's stomach dropped. He called her immediately, but she didn't answer. He texted back, "Where are you?" "Rose Garden Cafe on 6th Street. Please hurry." He left his office without explanation, ignoring James's questions, and drove to the cafe himself. When he burst through the door, he found Elena sitting at a corner table, looking shaken. What happened? He slid into the seat across from her, resisting the urge to pull her into his arms. Did he refuse to sign? Alexander. Elena's voice was strange. My husband, the man I married, he never showed up. Instead, a woman came. She claimed to be you. She said that you and I were actually married, that there was some mix-up at the registry office, and that I was never really married to the man I thought I was married to. Alexander felt like he'd been punched. What are you talking about? She showed me documents, marriage certificates with your name and mine. She said... Elena's hands were shaking. She said that she was supposed to marry you for a business arrangement, but something went wrong, and somehow I ended up with your marriage certificate instead. Alexander, is that true? Have we been married for the past year without knowing it? The pieces started falling into place in Alexander's mind. He had married someone a year ago, a woman named Vanessa Wilson, arranged by his grandfather to satisfy inheritance requirements. But he'd never actually met her, never seen her face. They'd signed papers through lawyers, and he'd been given a marriage certificate that he'd barely glanced at. Could it be true? Could Elena be the woman whose name was on that certificate? I need to make a call, Alexander said, pulling out his phone. He called his lawyer, demanded an immediate investigation. While they waited, Elena told him about the woman who'd approached her, Vanessa Wilson, claiming to be Alexander's intended bride, claiming that Elena's marriage had been a mistake. 20 minutes later, Alexander's lawyer called back with confirmation that made his heart soar and sink simultaneously. Mr. Sterling, there was indeed an error. The registry office processed 2 marriage certificates on the same day. One for you and Miss Wilson, one for Miss Hart and her arranged husband. But they got mixed up. The certificate filed under your name was actually with Miss Elena Hart. You've been legally married to her for the past year. Alexander hung up and looked at Elena, who was watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. It's true, he said quietly. You're my wife. Elena let out a shocked laugh. This is insane. This is actually insane. All this time, when you were complaining to your mysterious husband about your terrible boss, that was you. Elena covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, all those things I said. All true, apparently. Alexander couldn't help but smile. You called me stingy, heartless, impossible to please. You were all of those things. But she was laughing now too, the tension breaking. This can't be real. This doesn't happen in real life. And yet, here we are. Alexander reached for her hands, pulling them away from her face so he could see her eyes. Elena, I didn't know. I swear to you I didn't know. But now that I do... Now that you do, what? We're married. We've been married. You fell in love with your own wife without knowing it. Is that really so strange? I fell in love with you the moment I saw you. That was real, whether we were legally married or not. He squeezed her hands gently. The question is, what do we do now? I don't know, Elena whispered. This is overwhelming. I need time to think, to process. Take all the time you need. But Elena, I want you to know, I'm glad it's you. I'm glad that the woman I married, even unknowingly, is the woman I fell in love with. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. However this happened, whatever cosmic coincidence or bureaucratic error brought us together, I'm grateful for it. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You really mean that? Every word. The next week was chaos. The story of the mixed-up marriage certificates leaked somehow, and suddenly Elena and Alexander were the subject of intense speculation. Reporters camped outside Sterling Group headquarters. Employees whispered and stared. Victoria Chen submitted her resignation, which Alexander accepted immediately, offering her a generous severance package. Through it all, Elena and Alexander navigated their strange new reality. They were legally married but had never actually been together. They were in love but still learning each other. They were the subject of public fascination but wanted privacy. "We could get divorced," Elena said one evening. They were in Alexander's office after everyone else had gone home. "It would be simpler. We could start over properly, date, get married again when we're ready." "Is that what you want?" Alexander asked carefully. Elena was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the city lights. "No," she finally said. "No, I don't think it is. Is that crazy? We barely know each other, but somehow we're married, and instead of being terrified, I feel right. Like maybe this is how it was always supposed to be." Alexander crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. "Not crazy. Not even a little bit. So what do we do?" "We make it real," Alexander said. "We stay married. We move in together. We build a life. We do all the things that married couples do, except we do them knowing exactly who we are and what we want." "And what do you want?" "You," he said simply. "For the rest of my life, Elena Hart Sterling. Just you." She kissed him then, their first real kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Elena Hart Sterling. I like the sound of that." "Then it's settled. We'll have a proper wedding celebration for my grandfather and your grandmother. We'll honeymoon somewhere beautiful. And we'll spend the rest of our lives figuring out how we got so incredibly lucky." "You're sure about this?" Elena asked. "You, the man who never believed in love?" "I'm sure about you. That's all that matters." The Sterling Group's annual gala was the event of the season, held in the grand ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel. Alexander stood near the bar, watching his wife work the room with natural grace and charm. She'd been promoted to head of design 6 months ago, a position she'd earned through brilliant work and innovative thinking. Under her leadership, Sterling Group had launched its most successful product line in company history. But that wasn't why Alexander was smiling as he watched her. He was smiling because she'd just finished chatting with a group of investors, and now she was making her way across the ballroom toward him, that radiant smile on her face, her hand resting protectively over the small bump that was just beginning to show beneath her elegant dress. "Hi," she said when she reached him, sliding into his arms like she belonged there, like she'd always belonged there. "Hi yourself." He kissed her forehead. "Tired?" "Exhausted. These heels are killing me, and your daughter has been using my bladder as a punching bag." "My daughter? I thought she was your daughter when she kept you up all night with cravings last week." Elena laughed. "Fair point. She's definitely our daughter. Stubborn like you, emotional like me." Alexander's grandfather appeared beside them, looking frailer than he had even 6 months ago, but still sharp-eyed and smiling. "There they are, the most disgustingly happy couple I know." "We learned from the best," Elena said, kissing the old man's cheek. "I'm not going to make it to see my great-granddaughter," he said matter-of-factly. "The doctors have given me another month, maybe 2. "Grandpa?" Alexander started, his throat tight. "Don't." The old man held up a hand. "I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life, and I get to leave knowing that you—" He gripped Alexander's shoulder. "You finally learned what's really important. You found love, real love. That's all I ever wanted for you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You gave us the push we needed. If you hadn't insisted on that marriage requirement, then you two would have found each other anyway," the old man interrupted gently. "Some things are just meant to be. The universe has a way of putting people together who belong together." He smiled. "Though I'll admit, the mix-up at the registry office was a nice touch. Even I couldn't have planned that." "You didn't plan it?" Alexander asked suspiciously. His grandfather's eyes twinkled. "Now, why would you think I had anything to do with bureaucratic incompetence?" After he shuffled away to chat with other guests, Elena turned to Alexander. "Do you think he actually orchestrated the entire thing?" "Possibly. Probably." Alexander shook his head in amazement. I wouldn't put it past him. Well, if he did, remind me to thank him. Elena leaned her head against Alexander's shoulder. I can't imagine my life without you now. Even the version of you I only knew through phone calls, even that was enough to make me care. But this, being with you, knowing you, loving you, it's everything. Alexander wrapped his arms around her, careful of their unborn daughter, and held his wife close. Remember when I said I didn't believe in love at first sight? I remember. I was wrong. The moment I saw you running through that lobby, my whole world changed. I just didn't recognize it yet. He pulled back to look at her face, still awed by the fact that she was his. You taught me how to love, Elena. You taught me what it means to be human. And you taught me that fairy tales can come true, she replied softly. That the right person can make everything else fall into place. That love, real love, is worth taking risks for. As the orchestra began to play, Alexander led his wife onto the dance floor. Around them, 300 guests watched and whispered and speculated. But in that moment, Alexander and Elena were alone in their own world, moving together as if they'd been dancing together for years instead of months. What are you thinking about? Elena asked as they swayed to the music. I'm thinking about that elevator, about how a simple act, holding a door for a stranger, changed my entire life. He smiled down at her. I'm thinking about how lucky I am, how grateful. I'm thinking about the same thing, Elena admitted. Except in my version, I'm grateful for a bus that broke down, making me late, forcing me to run through that lobby at exactly the right moment to meet you. Fate, Alexander said. Destiny, Elena agreed. Or a meddling grandfather with connections at the registry office. They both laughed, and Alexander spun her carefully, watching her face light up with joy. This was his life now. This woman. This love. This happiness he'd never thought possible. 3 months later, Alexander sat in a hospital waiting room, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. James Park sat beside him, looking almost as anxious. Sir, you need to calm down. Everything's going to be fine. You don't know that. Childbirth is dangerous. Things can go wrong. Elena is strong. She's going to be fine. The baby is going to be fine. The delivery room doors opened and a nurse beckoned. Mr. Sterling, you can come in now. Alexander practically ran. Inside, he found Elena propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in pink blankets. Alexander, she said softly, come meet your daughter. He approached carefully, almost afraid to breathe. When Elena pulled back the blanket, he saw a tiny face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. Dark hair, like his. A small nose, like Elena's. Tiny fingers that immediately wrapped around his when he offered them. She's beautiful, he whispered, his voice breaking. She's ours, Elena said. Our little miracle, our proof that fate exists. What should we name her? Alexander asked, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. I was thinking, Grace Elizabeth Sterling. Because Grace brought us together. Grace gave us this family. Grace is what saved us both. Grace, Alexander repeated, testing the name. It's perfect. She's perfect. You're perfect. He looked up at Elena, this woman who'd changed everything. I love you. I don't say it enough, but I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. I love you too, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. For what? For holding that elevator door, for believing in me, for teaching me that love doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be real. Alexander leaned down and kissed her, gentle and reverent, mindful of the tiny life between them. When he pulled back, he was smiling through his own tears. You know what the best part is? He said. What? We get to do this for the rest of our lives, wake up together, build our family, grow old together, all because of one moment, one chance encounter, one elevator ride. Best elevator malfunction ever, Elena joked. Best day of my life, Alexander corrected. Until this one. Until every day with you. Little Grace chose that moment to yawn, a tiny, perfect sound that made both her parents laugh through their tears. The Sterling family estate had been transformed. What was once a formal, austere mansion now echoed with the sounds of children's laughter. 5-year-old Grace raced through the hallways, chased by her 3-year-old brother Michael, while their baby sister Sophie watched from her playpen with wide, curious eyes. Alexander had taken to working from home more often, unable to bear being away from his family for long hours. Elena had her own design studio on the estate grounds, where she continued to create innovative products while also teaching classes to young designers. They'd found balance, purpose, joy. On this particular Sunday afternoon, they sat in the garden, watching their children play. Grace had Elena's passion and Alexander's determination. Michael had Alexander's business sense and Elena's creativity. Sophie was still too young to show her personality, but Alexander suspected she'd be a perfect blend of both her parents. "Do you ever think about it?" Elena asked, leaning against Alexander's shoulder. "About how different our lives would be if that elevator hadn't gotten stuck?" "Every day," Alexander admitted. "I think about the man I was before you, cold, isolated, convinced that love was a weakness. And I think about who I am now, a husband, a father, a man who understands that love is actually the greatest strength." "Your grandfather would be so proud of you," Elena said softly. Alexander's grandfather had passed away 2 months after Grace was born, long enough to meet his great-granddaughter, to hold her and bless her and tell Alexander that his job was done. The old man had died peacefully in his sleep, a smile on his face, having seen his grandson finally, truly happy. Grace ran up to them, breathless and excited. "Daddy! Mommy! Can we have ice cream?" "It's almost dinner time," Elena started. But Alexander was already standing, scooping his daughter into his arms. "Why not? Let's have ice cream for dinner. Let's be rebels." "Alexander Sterling, you're going to spoil them," Elena protested, but she was laughing. "That's the plan," he said, gathering Michael into his other arm while Elena picked up Sophie. "Spoil them with love, with time, with memories, with everything I never had growing up, everything I never thought I'd be able to give." They walked toward the house together, a family, complete and happy and real. Love finds us in the most unexpected ways, often when we're not looking for it, and sometimes when we've convinced ourselves we don't need it. Alexander Sterling spent 32 years building walls around his heart, believing that emotion was weakness and love was a distraction. But one act of simple kindness, holding an elevator door, changed everything. Alexander's instinct to help a stranger, to hold that door despite his usual cold efficiency, set everything in motion. Small acts of kindness can have profound, life-changing consequences. Both Alexander and Elena had to lower their defenses, risk rejection, and open themselves to possibility. Alexander had to admit he was capable of love. Elena had to trust that Alexander's feelings were genuine despite the power imbalance and complications. They could have walked away from the complications, the office gossip, the mixed-up marriage certificates, the messy situation. Instead, they chose to lean in, to fight for what they felt, to believe that what they had was worth the risk. They met in an elevator during a malfunction. They fell in love while she was technically married to someone else. They discovered they were actually married to each other through a bureaucratic error. None of it was conventional or right timing. But it was their timing, and it was perfect. The greatest strength is the ability to love and be loved. Alexander believed love made him weak. He discovered that love made him human, that opening his heart didn't diminish him, it completed him. We spend so much of our lives trying to control everything, to plan every step, to avoid risk and vulnerability. But the best things in life, the most transformative, beautiful, life-changing things, often come from chaos, from mistakes, from moments when our carefully constructed plans fall apart and we're forced to improvise. Sometimes the elevator gets stuck. Sometimes you meet the love of your life while running late to an interview. Sometimes you fall in love with your own wife without knowing it. And sometimes that's exactly how it's supposed to happen. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love exists, that fairy tales can come true, and that the right person can make all the chaos worthwhile. Because somewhere out there, someone is holding an elevator door. Someone is running late. Someone is about to have their entire world changed by a simple act of kindness. Your love story is waiting. All you have to do is be brave enough to make a step.